Hi, I'm Mrs. Sheffield. I have been a teacher for 15 years. I taught 4th grade, 5th grade for 2 years, and then I taught kindergarten for 12 years. This coming year in 2022, I will be teaching preschool. So, classroom management is so important, and you hear people talk about it all the time, but there's so much that is shared, and not always is it really that complicated. And I wanted to share my top 4 things for classroom management. Like I said, I've taught older and younger. I believe that classroom management is key in whatever grade you teach, and it is the #1 way to make your classroom successful. As a kindergarten teacher, my kindergarten class, I am very proud of that. We are very well behaved as a class. We get things done. We behave when we go to rotations, and when we have a substitute, the students know what to do. I pride myself on that because I think it's very important to have classroom management, and little kindergartners can do it just as much as the older kids. 4 ways to help your classroom management. According to me, they're not the one and only, but these are the ones that work for me and help my classroom be successful. Classroom management is very important. The reason is because learning happens in the classroom. And if your classroom is chaotic, kids aren't learning. If your classroom has students that are not behaving and listening because they're not sure what they're supposed to be doing or they just don't care, they're not learning. Someone else is not learning. They're messing up their own learning, they're messing up someone else's learning, and it's not a good environment. You also have students that struggle emotionally and have anxieties and things like that. And classroom management helps those students as well because they are the ones that are going to be triggered by chaos in your classroom. And that will just set off more behaviors and it's like a crash. So classroom management is key. And these are my top 4 that I try to make sure happen every year. When I say try, I mean it's not perfect. No classroom management is ever perfect, ever. And I've taught for 15 years, and some years some things work, some years some things don't, and you could try all sorts of things. I'm not an outside incentive person. Some people will do prizes and classroom rewards and things like that. I don't believe in that. That's just me personally. I believe in being the very best you can be for yourself and for other people. So my classroom management is very basic, 4 things. No extra prizes and privileges, except for when needed. But in general, these are the top 4 things that help my classroom succeed. Number 1, routines. Routines are key in your classroom. You need to set them up. The very first several weeks of school is focused on routines. It doesn't matter if you teach 5th grade, who has been in school for 6 years, they still need to know the routines of your classroom. Your classroom is different than last year's classroom, so your routines need to be retaught. Okay? I was lucky enough where I taught kindergarten and they had 0 routines. They had no understanding of what was expected at school and the behaviors and how they should act and how to do things. And very simple things that you would think every kid knows this. Well, they don't. They've never been in school, some of them. So for them, this basic routine, well, how would they know it? Their home doesn't have that routine. They didn't go to preschool. So someone's got to teach those routines. So anyways, in your classroom, you need to know the routines that you want to have set in place. Now, routines are so wide and variety and so many. And there are so many teacher checklists out there that you can find to help you know which checklist items, which routines you want your class to know. I'm just going to mention a couple of the basics, and then you can go from there and make them consistent. So I'm going to practice my routines. For example, how do I want them to walk into my classroom? Where do I want them to put their folder? What do they do when they first come in? How do they sit down? When they leave the table, what do they do when they leave their table? They push in their chair. Right? Those things I need to teach because that's not something that they're used to. So I'm going to practice every single day how to do that. When I practice or when I want my students to stop working and to listen, I'm going to do my teacher call. Well, how do they know what to do if I don't practice? So the first several weeks, we practice that teacher call. So anytime throughout the school year, anytime that someone else is in the classroom, they can say this teacher attention getter and participate, stop, and listen, which I'll have to share another time because I absolutely love mine. So you're going to teach these routines. Then you're going to be consistent. Not everything in a classroom can stay consistent, but for the most part, you can keep your routine the same. You can teach how to do something and it will most likely stay the same. There will be days where things do change and we just have to get used to life where that happens, and it's okay. But for the most part, then the next day they come back and it's the same routine and they know what to do. You're gonna also wanna be consistent with it. When kids know what is expected and what to do, most of the time they will rise up and they will do it. I'm not gonna say all the time, and not all kids, they're a whole different issue. They have other things going on. That's not what the video is about. But in general, most of the time, if the kids know what you expect, they know the routine, they've practiced it, they're going to do it, okay? My second classroom management is how I act and respond in my classroom. It is purely based on me. It is to be stern, but then to smile. I want my kids to like me, obviously, of course. Why would I not want my classroom to like me? That's me personally. I want the kids to know that I love them, but I also need them to behave and act their very best. So at the very beginning of the year, I am stern. This is the rule, this is what's expected, blah, 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 right? That is my persona. But I don't want kids to think I'm some mean teacher right from the get-go, because I'm not. So I am stern in what I say, and we don't act like that in our classroom. How can we make a better choice? So I'm going to be stern, but then I'm going to give it back to them and give them a little bit of responsibility. When I say I'm stern, but then I smile, this is what I mean. Johnny, that is not okay. We do not do that. Do not mistreat my things like that. Thank you. All right, get back to work, honey. Something very simple. He sees my don't do that face, but then sees the, hey, I care about you. Go ahead and keep going. Let's try again. You can also use that with your words. You can simply just say, hey, sweetheart, we don't do that, okay? You're gonna stop because that's not safe. Okay, thank you. Your face tells a lot. So if you are stern, just smile afterwards. Reassure him that you care about him. Let him know that you want them to win and be successful as well. Kids shouldn't always see a stern, growly face. No one wants that. No one. But a child especially needs to know that even when they make a mistake or they're not their very best, it's okay. It's totally fine for them to try again. And that smile is key in my opinion. That's just me, according to Mrs. Sheffield. That's my number one, well, after routines, I guess. I don't know, it's a toss-up. But basically, being stern but smiling is so, so important to me in my classroom. So give it a try in your classroom. It just helps build that relationship, that connection, and that's exactly what you need, is you need to become a friend, but not be a friend at the same time. There needs to be a certain level of respect, but there also needs to be that love and connection between teacher and student. Number 3 is responsibility. I teach 5-year-olds, or I have taught 5-year-olds for 12 years, and that is so big. They love responsibility. They love to be a part of the classroom, but even so did my older kids as well. I just didn't utilize that as much as I know how to now. But in kindergarten, it was a key component to my classroom management. My students knew that they played a role, that they were expected to behave a certain way when they were teaching a lesson, when they were doing the Pledge of Allegiance, when they were in charge of cleaning up. They were responsible for these things. They were a part of the classroom. It made the classroom setting a special place for them because they needed to be there. They needed to be their very best. and it gave them a sense of self-worth. And that to me is so important. So when you go to set up your classroom, think, how can I incorporate student responsibility? This is also one of those things that will be helpful when you have behavior issues. Not all kids respond certain ways, but if you have a behavior child, you can simply try responsibility. And what that means is, hey, Matt, will you please go do this for me? He might not, he might so. But if you call on someone else to do it after he says no, then I'll be like, wait, I could have done that. I want to do that. And then maybe next time he'll say yes. When it comes to asking that behavior child for help, you can give them responsibility to help someone else. So for example, I would say, Susie, it looks like Jenny needs a little bit of help. Susie, can you go help Jenny with this? I bet she would really appreciate. You're really good at that. Can you go help her? And that gives them another sense of responsibility, a sense of love, and they're giving to someone else. That's a whole nother behavior thing, but I wanted to mention responsibility in the classroom is key, in my opinion. So figure out how you can help students be responsible in your classroom. Last but not least is positive feedback. Honestly, this one I'm like, it's important, yes. I don't overdo it, no. Positive feedback is key, but I don't not all the time does it work. For example, I might say, so-and-so is sitting so nicely at the rug. And that works with about 10 other kids. But then you got the 5 kids that aren't listening, and they don't care about what so-and-so is doing. So sometimes positive feedback doesn't work, but you can start with positive feedback. For example, Lucy is sitting so nicely and ready to learn. Thank you, Lucy. Or you can say something like, Jackson is doing a great job being a good friend today. Let me tell you how. So you can shout out and mention things, and that will really help other kids realize, oh, my teacher thinks that's a good skill. It's a good thing to do. And by learning that, they can now connect to themselves. They just didn't think about it. No one taught them, hey, this is how you be super awesome, right? They just naturally will learn. Some of them will naturally just be a little extra kind or helpful or behave really well. But some kids need a little lesson. They need to be taught. Oh, by picking up the trash on the floor, that was really nice. My teacher didn't ask me, but I know now that she thinks that's awesome and that it's super helpful. So now I can do that. So giving positive feedback will help the person doing it and will help other people around them. Not always does this work. And that's why I'm like on the bottom of the list for classroom management. It does help a lot of kids. Doesn't help all of them. Definitely didn't work a ton when I taught older grades. Very successful in kindergarten, not always. 5th grade, I didn't do it too often because it was like, right, rolling your eyes. Oh, the teacher thinks so-and-so is awesome, blah, blah, blah. So there's different ways to give positive feedback. Whole class doesn't always work. And a lot of people preach it, but you can't reach all the kids that way. And like I said, sometimes it just doesn't work with certain kids and certain grades and certain environments. And it depends on where you work and what they are exposed to at home and things like that. So here are some other ideas for classroom management. So here are a couple more ideas of how to use positive feedback in your classroom. That's not calling out someone else. Positive feedback can be very quietly done and very specifically done to certain children. You want to give it as much as possible. But one of the things that you could say would be something like, Johnny, you wrote your name really nicely today. Very simple. When you're walking around, you can simply say, thank you for participating in our lesson today. I didn't make a big deal about it, but that child now knows that when they raise their hand to say something, it meant a lot to me as a teacher. So are they going to do it again? Most likely. A simple pat on the back or pat on the shoulder and say something like, you're doing great. can go a long way for a child. They could be sitting there now thinking, well, what was I great at? Was it this? Was it this? What is it this? And they might think all of them are what made them great. So that tiny little positive feedback comment can mean the world to so much. That tiny little positive feedback can be huge for a child. You just have to figure out the right way to do positive feedback for each child. And some will love it as a classroom setting, some would prefer it quietly done, and some, it's just here, there, when it fits right, what is going to make them comfortable, because you don't want to make a child uncomfortable. You have to get to know your children to know which is the right way, but you can start doing all of them and figure out which one works for that child. So to recap, my 4 best ways to have a successful classroom management is 1, practice those routines. Know what you want them to do, write it down, practice them over and over again, be consistent with them. When it comes to breaks or a couple days off from school, practice them again. Not overboard, but definitely practice them again so they know that you didn't forget the most important thing of routines and doing what is expected in your classroom. Number 2, be stern but smile. You gotta show what is expected, the behavior level that is there, but that you love them and care about them. Even if they make a mistake, it's okay. You want to give them that reassurance that you love them. Number 3, responsibility in the classroom. Let them be responsible. I often will tell my students that they're responsible for their learning. I can't put it in their head. I can't do it. So they have to actually make an effort to learn. I wish I could just, it'd be so easy, but I can't. So they're responsible for their own learning. Number 3, be responsible. There are so many ways that these kids can be allowed to be responsible. They're responsible for their own learning. They are responsible for the classroom. They can be given responsibility to help their behaviors step up a notch. Okay. Number 4, positive feedback. Give them the reassurance and the encouragement to continue those good behaviors, to learn those good behaviors. Do it secretly, out loud, in front of the class, to the child individually. A simple pat, a smile, very simple positive feedback so they know that what they're doing is right, that what they're doing is happy and good. And you will have a successful classroom. I hope that these help you in your classroom. Have a wonderful year.